All right. Well, I've got a really good topic for tonight, and that is one related to how much SQL Server is used with Access in factories. I've closed 4 deals this month in April. One factory that uses Excel, $14 million factory. They were using Excel and they called me up and says, Juan, we can't keep up like this. We need to use Access. Can you design us a simple system? Because all they have is 4 products. I says, yeah, we can do it. So they signed a $47,000 proposal, and we are building them a inventory system and order shipping system because we have all those parts already done. So it's just a question of putting them together and providing them with the customization. So they're really happy. I closed another factory here in Illinois that does metal casting. They use molds, actually plastics. They use a plastic is a very interesting application because they use plastic. They create plastic parts for ovens, and an oven, industrial oven, can go up to 500 degrees, 1200 degrees, and the plastic that they use actually gets better with temperature. It gets stronger and better with temperature. It's a special kind of plastic. And they had a really old Access system, and we're going to upgrade them to 64-bit. And just got that proposal signed today, and really happy about helping them out. And then we closed 2 other factories this month. So I'm thinking to myself that would be a good topic today as to why is it that Access with SQL Server is used so much in manufacturing. Now, I'm not sure if you know this, but I'm a mechanical engineer. And also my first love is manufacturing production, right? I'm an operations guy. When I first graduated from college, I went to work for the largest jewelry factory in the world that produces, that's where I learned how to do annealing. That's where I learned about gluing operations, painting. I learned about electroplating. I learned so much about casting. And it was an amazing experience. And from there, I went to pharmaceuticals, where we were doing pharmaceuticals, syringes. And I was in the packaging operation where we sterilized these pharmaceuticals. And then from there, I went to medical devices. In other words, the reason I'm so good at selling is because I understand manufacturing. So when a manufacturing company calls me, they are ready. They identify with me. They say, okay, we want Juan to work on our project because he gets it. He understands. And the whole reason I became into Access to begin with, because I was a production manager at a factory that no longer exists. We're in Seattle in Chicago. And what was amazing about that factory was we would produce ingredients for ice cream, right? So we do chocolate covered peanuts, chocolate covered almonds. We would do syrups. We would do cake. We would coat it in oil because you need to coat cake in oil before you put it into the ice cream, because otherwise the ice cream makes the cake too soggy. And when you bite on it, you don't really taste the cake. So we would take pieces of cake, put it into a barrel, and coat it with oil. And during that process, I grew frustrated with the ERP system because an ERP system is mostly designed for bean counters, right? Accounting. It doesn't take into account the production guys like me so much. And I still remember this. My ERP system was called Macola. So, and I apologize for the background noise because today is my wife's 60th birthday, and they're outside having a great time. And I just finished cooking dinner for them. I did Italian bread, and I did shrimp gumbo with pasta, and it turned out amazing because I'm also an amazing chef. Anyway, so this ERP system, the whole reason I got into Access was, I had a formula. Like, so say for example, I had to produce 10,000 pounds of chocolate covered peanuts. Well, 10,000 pounds of chocolate covered peanuts means that I have 7,000 pounds of peanuts, 2,000 pounds of chocolate, and several hundred pounds of other ingredients. And the formula would say that to produce 10,000 pounds, I have a scrap of 2%. Right. So they gave me that to begin with. They said, okay, you know what? Soto, you're going to lose 2% out of this. All right. Well, what if I didn't? What if I improve the operation so much that instead of 2% scrap, I only have 0.5% scrap? Well, I use Access to calculate that, right? Because now instead of ending up with 700 cases, I end up with 720 cases, which means my scrap level is lower and it was still within spec. So what I did there on app batch, when I beat the standards, I made more money, and I would calculate that. And I say, you know what, on this batch, I made the company $2,000 more because I produced more finished goods. And I would keep track of that. Why would I do that? Because at the end of the month, I would have like $20,000 in savings. I could save the company by producing more products, by reducing the scrap or producing it faster than the standard said. The standard said you need to use 100 man hours, and maybe I use 70 man hours. So I produced my money. And I kept track of that in Access. Excuse me, let me drink some water. And I was using SQL Server to store that data. Now, I had a production line that was terrible, the worst production line in the factory. And I needed a new piece of machinery. I needed a piece of machinery that would take the box and seal it, right? Because I had a person at the end of the line that was stealing a box, and then they were printing the lot number with a roller on the box. I said, you know what? That can be done by a machine. So I went to upper management. I said, you know what? I want $30,000 to buy this machine that's going to save me one person on that production line. And by the way, in the last 6 months, I saved you $60,000 because of all these batches I produced and I beat the standard. Now, when you go talk to management with numbers, there's no reason why they would say no. I mean, who would say no to that request, right? Now, if I would have gone to them and I would say, hey, I need a new tape machine for line number 3 because that saves us, they may save us some money. Well, how much money is that save? I don't know. You want to go with numbers, right? And I would go with numbers and I would get my projects approved. Who would not sign off on that in their right mind? So I was really happy with Access. And that's how I started consulting with Access. I went and I would consult evenings and started getting clients. And then it got to the point where I was working weekends and evenings, and I couldn't do both my job and my consulting work. And I told my wife, I'm ready to go full-time consulting. Now, this is before Google AdWords, right? There was no Google back then. I was getting work with word of mouth. So I quit my job and I was in a pickle because now I didn't have that steady income coming in, and I would hit the street knocking on doors trying to get. And then I found out about Google AdWords. And back then, Google AdWords, I mean, this is ridiculous, but back then, Google AdWords, when I first started, I was one of the first to use it. It was 15 cents a click. Now I pay $15 a click because there's so much competition. But I was paying 15 cents a click back then. And it grew my business, started hiring employees. I hired Ben Clothier, who's produced many books on Microsoft Access, and George, who's on this call, knows him well. But I am surprised and delighted by how many factories in the US are still using Access. It's unbelievable. Or want to use Access to improve their operation. Now, a standard ERP system on the low end will cost you anywhere between $50,000 and $100,000. On the high end, you're looking at millions of dollars, right? So picture this. You're a factory owner, and you have a choice of buying an ERP system, enterprise resource planning system. That's what ERP means, for $75,000. That's going to do your accounting, order entry, inventory, shipping, right? The works. But then you realize by buying the system that you have to change the way you do business to accommodate what the ERP system does, right? The ERP system requires you, for example, to issue materials to the production line with a ticket. You have to write a ticket. You have to register that material move from the warehouse to the production line. Where did you get it from the warehouse? What location? Somebody got to go into the computer and put in that transaction. And then you have to put in all kinds of transactions, and and it ends up being, you have to modify the way you do things for the ERP system. And now a lot of companies do that. They're like, okay, well, I guess that's what we need to do, right? But a lot of companies don't want to do that. They're like, okay, we know how to produce the stuff we do. We don't need somebody telling us how to do it. So when you go out and research these ERP systems, I always tell these customers before they spend $50,000 with us or $75,000 with us, I said, hey, have you researched ERP systems on the market? Because I hate for you to spend all this money when you could have just brought something off the shelf, right? First thing I tell them out the bat. So I say, have you done your research? Keep in mind where you're going down with this, now which role you're going down when you hire me, because once you hire me to do your ERP system, you're married to me forever, right? I'm going to design it, I'm going to create it, and I'm going to maintain it. And you're locked in with us forever. You can fire me anytime you want, right? Hire somebody else, but that person doesn't know how the system works or anything like that. So the fact of the matter is, can you guys hear me okay, by the way? In spite of the background noise? George, can you hear me okay? Did I lose George? I lost George.
I can
Okay,
hear
good.
you fine. You
All
don't
right.
have any background noise to me.
All right, perfect. I got that good microphone. Are you liking this topic so far, by the way?
I mean, it's interesting how you got started and everything.
Okay, thank you. So I tell them, look, you go down with me, it's like marriage. We're married at the hip. So you gotta be careful. You really want to go down this road. Now, to be honest, if they buy an ERP system, they're going to be married to the ERP system too, right? So it's no different than for me, right? But ERP system already done. You got to implement it. Now, one of the first gotchas with ERP system is invariably you need to modify it to suit your needs, right? So there is some customization involved. And sometimes that customization is so much, they'll actually tell you the next version that comes out, you have to pay us to modify it to work with your factory. And so they got that catch-22 where they have to pay for modifications, then they have to continue paying for these modifications. Now, last year I closed a deal with a factory in Illinois that does light fixtures, right? So let's say, for example, there's a school in California and they need 600 customized light fixtures. That's something that they can't buy off of Home Depot. My customer create these light fixtures for them, certain depth and size and so forth. And all they do is custom orders. And the whole factory runs on this Access with SQL Server system. And they approached me and they said, Juan, we want you to take it over because we need somebody who can really optimize Access with SQL Server. Somebody who can really do it. So what we've been doing, the first thing we did was, does it need indexes? Now, when you're in SQL Server and you need to check if there's an index now, does anybody know what the shortcut key is to check for the execution plan? Control L, as in Larry. You press Control L, it shows you the execution plan and it actually tells you if there's an index missing that can improve performance. And so we do that and we see improvements. But the system is still not good enough because it's using local tables for an operation. It's got hybrid queries. It's using local tables, SQL Server tables to do calculations. So we start moving those operations to SQL Server via store procedure. And they're just amazed. They're like, oh my gosh, this is so much better than what we do. So right now we're in beta. We're going to launch in May in full production. So the other day I'm having this meeting with them. I said, okay, we're going to launch in May. On Friday at 2:00, we'll stop the factory. They said, wait. They tell me, what do you mean we're going to stop the factory at 2:00? This is, we're not stopping the factory so you can roll out the new version. Says, well, when do you want to roll out? Well, we can roll out over the weekend. All right, well, okay. So now we're going to have to go in there Saturday morning, and they never work weekends, so they have to come in too. I'm going to have to go in there Saturday morning to roll out the new version of Access SQL Server that's an Office 365 that's been optimized with SQL Server doesn't use local tables, so they can use it or VPN when they're home. They're really excited about the possibilities. So I've been able to help these companies out with their needs because of my experience with production, operations, my intimate knowledge of how to improve access with SQL Server. Now, have any of you guys have any factory clients? Have any of you guys seen similar experience like I have where you helped a manufacturing client?
Not manufacturing, no.
No.
What industries have you helped out?
I work with a utility company. I work with a psychiatric company. I have a infusion company, insurance company, a co-op for vending machine company.
Interesting.
Those are the current ones.
Now, the insurance company I am very familiar with because I used to be an insurance agent back in the day, a fully licensed insurance agent. Do they use Access to issue policies and do claims?
No, it's more they use Access to import the commissions that are sent and then decide where they're going to go, by what percentage, to who, what, when, and where.
Yes. So it's a brokerage that has multiple
Sort of, yeah.
lines with different companies. Like they'll sell for Prudential and they'll sell for other companies like Berkshire Hathaway, and they'll get a check every month from these companies deposit into their bank. And so the company will deposit $20,000 and then send them a report. $20,000 are these renewals, and you have to figure out which agent gets what part of the commission.
Yeah.
Oh, great. And you did that in Access with SQL Server or just Access?
No, just Access. I just got into SQL Server this year, actually, with a utility company. They have they go out and they clean the power lines. You know, they cut down the trees and, you know, the limbs overhanging and everything like that. So I've designed a program in Access that they have on their portables, and they can log the work they do. But it had to be with a local back end because sometimes they're out in the middle of nowhere and they don't have a internet connection. Once they get done at the end of the week, logging all their time and everything, I have a process that validates it, and then it uploads it to the SQL Server. And then the supervisors can log into the SQL Server, double check the work, and then they send it to the billing department, or they okay it so the billing department can look at it and the payroll department can look at it and run their processes on it.
Okay. So what challenges do you have? Go ahead, Klaus.
No, just a question. Wouldn't it be better on the laptops to have SQL Server Express? They do work wonderfully on the laptop. Ad hoc.
I had never thought of putting SQL Server Express on the laptop. It's George.
It's a no-brainer. It's very easy to do.
But I mean, the local back end is so easy. Why go to the problem of putting the SQL Server Express on the local? I mean, it doesn't need the processing power.
Synchronization with the main server.
That, okay, I never looked at that.
Yeah, that would be where I would look for leverage. You know.
Yeah, that was my idea as well.
Yeah. I mean, in addition, you'd have to explore that, but I think that's where I would look for that. Is that
so? Let's talk about that. How would we synchronize? Let's say the customer calls out up and says, "We want to use SQL Server." How would he synchronize those records in SQL Server Express with the main record? Because I would imagine you would need to use GUI IDs, right?
Right.
So explain, George, what GUI IDs are to Adolf and Klaus.
Well, GUI ID is a globally, the acronym stands for.
I know.
globally
I personally
unique
know the
ID.
GUID. That's not a problem.
Well, no, maybe Adolf doesn't know what that is. So go ahead.
Isn't
George.
that the anytime you change a record, that number changes? It's a unique number within the record.
No, a GUID is like a 26 character string that's global. GUID, GUID stands for globally unique ID, which theoretically they are unique in everywhere. And so instead of an auto number, you use that.
Okay.
And then you can count more reliably on syncing. Yeah.
That's just the opposite of that number, which changes, because as you said, the GUID never changes. And the good thing about the GUID is that you can create it in front of the record, because it's always unique. You don't need the record with it.
Yeah,
would you make that the index?
No, it's a value. You would put this field in your table, designate it as the primary key, and then generate. There's actually functions around, and I'm sure Ben has one over there at ITMEC that just generates those numbers for you, and then you can use that.
Isn't there an internal call for that?
It's been a while since I've been retired.
Yeah, there is an
years.
internal GUI ID you can use. You don't have to use a function. The SQL Server will come up with a unique ID.
But I think Access will also.
I think in Access you need an API for that one.
Yeah, but anyway, the thing is the only time I've ever done it was to synchronize between a SQL Express instance on the local box and one in the cloud. And what do they help me out here? Replication?
Yeah.
Is that still a feature in SQL Server?
You can do merge replication even with the SQL Express. But on the other side, you have to have a normal SQL version, not an Express. You can't merge two Expresses.
But you can use merge replication with if you're merging to a standard SQL Server.
Yes.
Yeah. So
to be clear, Adolf, what you did is nothing wrong, right? I mean, I may have done that. I would have done that too, because the amount of data is so small and the synchronization is so quick. You probably, and it's one way, right? In other words, a crew goes out to services a tower. They have they create the records. They come back into the office, synchronize. It goes up to the cloud. And maybe you'll download some reference tables like states or updated or some product numbers or tax ID, but there's no need to edit the data coming down from the server.
Yeah.
No, it's you're right. The circuit numbers, the tower numbers, that comes down. It's my synchronization process. Yeah. And I use a desynced date field. So anytime a field changes, the date that it was changed changes. And then, when I link up or sync, I look at the desync date. And if one of them's older, it then, downloads that information and brings it in. The way I handled uniqueness is the main table is called the timesheet. And that's all the information for the week. In there, you have subtables, labor, equipment, and the activities that they did. But the portable requests from the server 5 unique IDs from the timetable, and then downloads those and keeps them in storage. So as a field person needs to generate a new timesheet, he uses one of those 5 numbers. So it's unique on the server. And then I have that timesheet number on each one of the labor, equipment, and activity tables. So when it gets pushed back up to the server, it still has uniqueness because I use the two indexes of the timetable and the actual table, like the labor table. And that gives me uniqueness still up on the server.
I see.
Works.
That was, if you've never done it before, you had to figure out something, and that's what I did.
Yeah. Well, it
So
sounds
you're
like it
using a
works well.
composite key.
A what?
Yeah, you're using a composite key, two fields to create a key, primary key, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
George, you had a question or a
Oh,
comment?
no, I was just gonna say that you'd asked if anybody had any experience with it, and I was gonna wait until but I think
Okay.
Adolf has solved the problem already. I was just gonna say that one of the projects that I got a chance to work on was exactly this. It was for Bonneville Power down in Portland, and we had a team of, I believe, 12 or 14 estimators for all the construction work that Bonneville does, power line and stuff, substations. And we took all of their individual Access backends and consolidated them into SQL Server. And that was
Nice.
And that was a very rewarding project because these folks were constantly fighting back and forth, whose estimate had which number, because they were all in separate MDBs at the time.
Oh,
That was
Klaus, have you had to synchronize over multiple crews like Aleph did?
Oh no, I had it once, but it wasn't a problem because I always use then I use as you say, a composite key, so it's not a problem.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. So
That's
Aleph,
easy.
what challenges did you have in your project when it comes to Access SQL Server?
Well, basically it's the speed. Some of my, to start with, I just linked all the tables down through ODBC from the SQL Server down to the Access.
What version of the driver did you use for that?
I used the native one because that one was already in there. I do realize that loading up one of the newer ones will substantially speed it up. I just haven't had time to do that.
Yeah.
I found, in the office, I have, an excellent connection to the SQL Server, so there is very little delay, if any at all. But in my program, I put a function that'll ping the server, and then it shows the user the results of that. And I say, if you're running over 100 milliseconds, you don't have a good connection. I said, if you go over 150 or 2, it just slows down to the point to where it's useless. So I am now reading how to do pass-through queries and how to do views and stored procedures.
Okay.
And that's what I'm working on and trying to figure out how to use your, how to set up views and how to create queries, stored procedures on SQL, because, as you know, the SQL language is just that much different.
Well,
and it causes you.
Here's a good place.
That's not true. That's not true. The TSQL is much more able to do things than the Access SQL.
Are you aware of the tool on the AUG website, the SQL converter that Juan?
And I tried that with one of my more complicated queries, and it just didn't work. It blew up.
I would love a copy of that query, Adolf, if you can email me.
I would be tickled pink to do that for you, Juan.
Yeah, let me give you my email address. I'll put in the comments here, jsoto@itimpact.com. And I'll send that over to Ben Sackridge, who's the author of that tool.
Okay.
He loves those kind of challenges. Making it better.
Great. I mean, I love doing what I'm doing. Sometimes it's frustrating as hell, but I really love helping my clients do something that used to take them 8-10 hours and now it takes them 15 minutes.
Perfect.
Yeah, that's
Well,
one.
that's
one-
why we
one
do
of the-
this. I mean, that's what we all do. Is Klaus and George. That's why we all do this, because we love having that feeling when the customer calls you up and says, "You don't realize how much you've changed my life.
Yeah.
How the quality of my life has improved with your work."
Oh yeah.
Klaus, have you ever had a client to do that too? They tell you that, Klaus? How you've impacted their quality of life?
quality of life. I don't know. I'm working more with big companies and with the departments of the big companies. So that's not so private.
George, you were
thing
going to say
there.
something?
I'm going to say the very first Access project I ever did back in about 1994 or 95, somewhere in there. When one of the department, I will call her a secretary. She had more duties than being the secretary. When she retired, they didn't replace her because my Access database was on the desktops of the people in her unit. And they just split, they just all took over and did it themselves. So I don't know what her salary was, but that's what they saved by having me do it.
Nice.
I lived on that for the next 25 years. You know, the inspiration of that.
So Adolf, it warms my heart to hear that you're going to learn about views and stored procedures. Now, a couple of pointers I want to give out to you now that you're starting this journey down this path. Number one, in order to use a view to edit data, it needs an index in Access.
Okay.
Are you familiar how to create that index?
Yes.
Okay, great. Because if you go to accessexperts.com/start here, there is a blog post on how to create indexes for views so they become editable.
Yeah, the point is that the view which you create can have the index created in Access. It need not to be an SQL Server index, which makes things much easier sometimes.
Yes, it's like an Access index, not a SQL Server index.
Yes.
I didn't know there was a difference between an index is either it's a primary index, a long integer.
Well, not in this case. This is an index on your view that's created by Access, so that then when you bind the view to a form, you can edit the data.
Oh, okay. Okay. And are you still linking via ODBC the view down?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. So let me send you the URL, accessexperts.com/start here. And there is a post there that will talk about how to create indexes on views so you can become editable. Now, I rarely do that. I use mostly views with reports, and reports you'll need to edit the data.
Yeah.
Now, there is a gotcha, though, at some point. Let's say, for example, you have a view that's got 10 tables, which is not, no, it's not unusual. It can happen from time to time.
Mhm.
When you link it back to the Access front end, create the index, and you edit the data. Let's say, for example, you delete the record. The user deletes the record, so we don't need this record anymore. SQL Server may pull up their hands like this and say, I don't know which table you want to delete this record from.
Okay.
You may run across that particular situation. And when you do, you need to create what's called a delete trigger in SQL Server, where you go back to SQL Server Management Studio, create the delete trigger. So that delete trigger intercepts the deletion process and says, you know, delete the record from this table. And now SQL Server says, oh, I'll just run the delete trigger and I'm done. So keep in mind that, and that's an unusual case. I would say in 1%, maybe 0.1% of the times where you have to create delete triggers, insert triggers. And I've only done it twice in my lifetime, in my career. But you know, it's something to keep in mind. Klaus, have you had to do delete triggers on views at any point?
Oh, I did, but I don't remember when. Yes, I did.
Yeah, it's very rare. It's very rare.
Yeah, I have one created for me, a trigger, because the possibility to do automatically stored procedures from the client to the server. And if you use, in the past, if you use Power Apps, you had to pay the flow, and you could go around the flow if you work with that trigger. So I did one trigger, delete and just a create trigger, which does that. What in the, if you send that, and I use the SQL Server syntax, and I send that to the SQL Server, and then say just do it. It's if it's an update or delete or whatever it is. And then you don't need that flow in Power Apps.
Very nice. The other issue you're going to come across with Adolf is something that we as Access programmers do all the time, which is not, say for example, you have a report, and that report requires several queries to be executed, one in sequential order, right? So you do query one, and then you do query two based on query one, then you do query three based on query two, and the last query in that sequence is the one that gets bound to the report. Now, of course, when you bind to the report and you run the report, it runs all those queries in succession. One SQL Server, one of the first things I did was do the same thing with views. I would create 5 or 6 views, and I create them stacked, and I would bind the last view to my report. Okay. But in SQL Server, there's a way around that. So you use only one view, and it's called CTE, Common Table Expression.
Yeah.
So next time you need to run multiple views, instead of doing multiple views, use a CTE. And it's a little tricky, but you'll get them. I'm sure you'll be able to research and see the examples online. And one thing that you're going to realize is you're going to quickly love them. This is great. Why? Because it reduces the number of views in your database, right? That's the one benefit. And number two is sometimes that's good because somebody might come along and change your view, and then that messes up all your reports, right? And so you want to, one of the things I learned the hard way was when I first started with SQL Server, I created this wonderful view that then I depend on for many reports. Right, so I create this one view, and then I use that as a basis for all my other reports. Like, for example, order details. Right, I might use that everywhere. Well, I found out the hard way that when I modified that view once, it crashed all my reports. The dependent view crashed, and so I have a hard and fast rule from now on that says every time I work on a report, it has a unique view, and in fact, the view name is the report name in Access.
Yeah, so I do that too.
Yeah, perfect. So keep to that and you'll be fine.
One question.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. When you do a view, these guys turn in their weekly spreadsheets. But when I do the view, I create the view for all the weeks and all the spreadsheets because I'm not filtering it. But if I link the table, it's my understanding that Access is pulling down all the weeks and then filters it within the front end. How do I get it to filter in the back end and then only give me that 1 week?
Well, great question. So you want to be able to send a query to SQL Server and return back the results. Are you using this for a report or form?
Form.
All right. So one of the things you want to do is you want to launch the form with just the records you need. Don't go and bind the form to all the records in the table.
Yeah, okay.
Right. So if I'm a supervisor and I'm looking at weeks, I should be able to launch that form with just that 1 week, right? Exactly. So the query itself is filtering just to that 1 week. Second thing you want to make sure is you have an index on that view or table by week number, right? So if that way, if I query, okay, give me week number 52, it's optimized because there's already an index on that, the week number, right? And so you always want to decide where 1 equals 0. That's a technique that Armin Stein created. If you search on his website, which I forgot his website. What is his website, George? Brahmenstein.
I don't have it off the top of my head. It's J Street Tech.
J Street Technologies, yes.
Yeah.
He has a technique there, and just do 1 = 0, and it'll pop up in Google, right? So what that does for you when you're designing the form with the criteria 1 = 0, it doesn't return any results because 1 never equals 0.
Yeah.
But it allows you to bind the table, the field records, the field objects in the form, and so forth. And then you want to use the open argument of the form to say, okay, go fetch week 52. So when I pass, maybe I'm from a search form or from some other mechanism, it's opening the form with the search argument and specifying the criteria. So you're using a search argument to specify what records to load in the form.
Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm going to say you could also do it with a stored procedure that returns the record set.
But this is a form.
Yeah.
You may want to edit the data, right?
Yeah, so
Yeah, I would like to be able to edit the data.
Then a view has to be the way
you can't do that with a
stored procedure. I heard
procedure.
you say report. So
no, it's a form.
What I did
you're right.
is once when I was not very good at with stored procedures, what I did is I sent to a very small table just that property with the name and the content, and then I have a view which then says where that table with that ID number. So I get always only that record or that records I wanted. And I could use a view, and I didn't need to use a stored procedure. That was the idea.
Okay.
If I link a table, a view, if I link a view and I query on that view, is it running the query on the front end or is it running on the SQL Server backend?
Well, that's why you want to make sure you use the latest ODBC driver, right? Because that ODBC driver that comes with Windows is the worst. Even Microsoft says you don't use it. There's actually a web page.
Should I be using then?
You should be using the latest one. Like right now, the latest one I believe is ODBC 18.
ODBC 18.
18, but the one I used the prior one, ODBC 17, which is 17 versions better
18.
than the one you're using.
Don't use 18, it doesn't work.
Don't use 18, Claus says. Use which one, Claus? 17?
Yes.
Yeah, so 17 is great. It's a great driver, 17. Get your hands on it.
Never use that 18. There are enough comments in internet which saying that the 18 is corrupt.
Yeah, we stay away from it too. We just use 17. Okay. But the ODBC driver technology has gotten so much better. It's smart enough to say, oh, he's doing a query in a view. Let me send that query to SQL Server and then return results back. Yes. Okay. The driver has a lot to do with that.
Okay. Didn't know that.
Yes.
I will get off that native driver tomorrow.
Yes. Make sure your IT department installs ODBC 17 on those laptops. You can have them both at the same time. So you can roll it out first, have IT install the ODBC driver on all those laptops, and then once they confirm it's rolled out, then you can issue an update to your program using ODBC 17.
Yeah, but then he has to change the ODBC, the connection string.
The connection strings, yes. And you want to make sure you have a beta database that you test these things with, right? So you make sure you have two databases, the production database and the beta, and then make sure you test the beta with the new ODBC connection string.
Well, I haven't rolled out. Go ahead.
Ben just wrote an article on our website, accessexperts.com/blog, that tells you the connection strings to use for ODBC 17. So make sure you look at that to find out what that is. So go to accessexperts.com/blog. Let me put that in the URL comments here. And we have a blog post that tells you exactly what the connection strings to use for ODBC 17. You're going to love that driver, Adolf. You're going to see it's much faster, much better.
It's also much more resilient.
Yes.
Yeah, it doesn't drop as easily as the older driver.
And for the life of me, I don't know why Microsoft still ships that old ass driver from 2003 with every version of Windows. I guess they're afraid of backward compatibility. And people, I was just declared people, look, it says you're right, not still use that old technology if you don't have it anymore. But they just continue shipping the same old thing with their PCs.
Oh, I know why. I have not a customer, but he wants that I get it, that I help him, but I don't, because he has Access 2003 and SQL Server 2008, and I don't support that any longer.
Yeah.
Okay. So I am really happy you're going down this journey, Adolf, because this is the same journey that George did and Klaus did and Alphonse, who's on the call from Italy. He's going through this journey. You're going to love the results of this. And once you do the first project with SQL Server, the rest of them were much more easier. Trust me, it gets easier with time.
Oh, there's a learning curve, and it's real steep at the beginning.
Yeah.
Yes, but it's really.
I learned stored procedures by getting a project which has thousands of stored procedures. They are very long and very difficult, and I had to read them and to understand them. So that was my learning curve. It was not an easy one, but you learn it.
Yep.
At least the T-SQL.
Yeah.
Anything else, Adolf, we can help you out with while we're here?
Boy, I tell you, I got 1,000,001, but I got enough to get me through for what? We don't meet again for another month, right?
And,
yes.
And one tip from me is using the SSMA for just converting also the queries, because that is quite good at the moment.
For converting what?
SSMA, the SQL Server, what is that? For Access, the conversion tool.
Oh, is that the migration assistant?
Yes.
Okay,
Which is not applicable in your case because you already did the project, but next project you do, make sure you use SSMA to create the SQL Server database.
I'm gonna have to import it again. I mean, we're still beta testing.
Okay.
And, the local database is the master database right now until I finally get the main one up there. Question that when I
use it even if I have the project, just for converting the queries sometimes, because it does a quite good job there. If you don't have an update or delete query, just a select query, it does a quite good job.
It converts it to a view on SQL Server?
Yes.
Oh.
I don't remember
quite
that.
Good. They're quite good, but only the latest version, which is 8.24, I think. Yes.
Okay, good.
The 8.24 is quite good at that. And I use it sometimes with the same front-end data, but I just drop it to a separate SQL Server, a new one, and copy that thing over. It's just text. So I create it in a new database and try that sometimes.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I looked at the SMA, the MMA or whatever, or MSSA. But in the past, I had used a MySQL, so I was using Bullzip. I don't know if you've ever heard of that one, but it's a shareware donation, and it converts access to all kinds of different databases, and it was working very well.
Nice.
Just if you have to go to MySQL, that's a nice way to do it. And but
how you call it? Can you write it in the
I'm sorry,
chat?
yeah. Where's my chat? I don't. Oh wait, maybe if I go to full view. Yeah, chat. It is called message here. It's bullzip. Just look under bullzip, in a search engine, access to, and all different types of databases, Oracle, MySQL, Microsoft SQL, and it builds, not only the make table, create table, delete database, make databases, but it also makes all the inserts too, with all the existing data. So it'll upload all that, and it just makes one huge SQL file.
Yeah, the same with the SSMA. Yeah, you can use that for that as well.
Yeah, but I'm going to look at the
SSMA.
SSMA.
Yeah, I will look at that. Now, when I do that, it wants to create that GUI ID that you were talking about earlier, or unique. It
won't do that. No, it won't
No.
do the GUI ID unless you specify, force it to. Otherwise, it'll use the same primary key you have in Access right now. So if you have an auto number access key in your table, it'll do an identity column, which is the equivalent in SQL Server.
Maybe Adolph, you're thinking about the timestamp field.
Yeah, that's it. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I was. I was.
Yeah, I would let it do that.
Yeah, you can do that with SSMA. You can do that.
Would you
would you
allow it to create a timestamp?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, then I got to put that in my Access program, because my syncing process is not table specific. It actually, the same function is used on all the tables. It looks at the local table, and it just goes through the field names and pulls the server table and goes through the server names. They have to be identical, which they should be, I think. And it compares them. So I didn't have to write it to be table specific.
Okay.
Well,
You want to see
if you're happy with the synchronization, keep using it. But if you're having issues with slowness, you may have to refigure that out.
Yeah. It's not the fastest thing in the world, syncing the information, but it works.
Okay.
That's number one. Yeah.
All right. Well, as long as it meets the business needs, right?
Yeah.
That's the important thing. Now, what you're going to find, maybe not with this project, because admittedly, you're probably looking at a few dozen records every time they go clean something, right? Right?
No, there's 40 or 50 people out there.
I know, but they're using how many laptops? Each one of them are using one laptop or one?
Each one is using one laptop.
Yeah,
so
and on one laptop, how many transactions you might synchronize that with?
Pushing it up there, they do, let me think. You got one timesheet. You've got 4 employees with their hours on average. You got 4 pieces of equipment, and then the DARs and the DAR details. You could have 50 of those. I'd say about 100 records.
Yeah, and so that's great. That's going to synchronize with what I pull. But the next project you have may have 10,000 records, and that's way too much. Right, that's way too much. Synchronization is way too much. And when you get to that level, I want to remember something. It's XML. You want to move to XML import into SQL Server. That's a lot quicker. And that'll work up to 100,000 records with no problem. So you
generate an XML sheet and send it up, and then it decides what it needs.
Exactly. You convert the table to XML. And then you have to create a stored procedure that receives an XML as a parameter. And that's lightning quick.
Okay.
Up to 100,000 records. And then after that, it becomes too slow. Then you have to get into integration services. But then that's a separate case altogether.
I used, to be honest, I do that with the XML on a different way. I use PowerShell for that, because there is a module which imports Excel dates, and I use Excel for that. Because if you have a newer Excel, it's not more than XML.
Okay.
And the PowerShell, there's a PowerShell module where you can put in an SQL statement that reads the Excel sheet. And that's lightning quick, even also with 100,000 records. But you don't have to.
Adolf wrote something in the comments. He says bullzip access to. Adolf, can you give more? Can you be more verbose? What is bullzip?
It's a third-party software.
Oh, it is? Okay. Never heard of it. Have you used it?
Yes, I used it for MySQL extensively, and I actually used it for the Microsoft SQL, and it works very well.
And what does it do?
It walks you through the screens. You choose the database, and then it lists all the tables. You choose which tables you want. Do you want to bring over only the schema or the schema and data? Do you want to drop the table if it exists? Do you want to drop the databases exists? Just a bunch of questions, and then you can either connect it directly to the SQL Server, or you can do a dump file, a SQL file, and then import that separately.
Oh, okay. Is that at bullzip.com?
Yeah,
that's something I've never used before. Okay. And why do you like it so much?
It worked, and it's very simple. It's straightforward. And MySQL did not have anything that I knew of at the time. Okay. So I had to use something. Now I also have to migrate one of my past programs from MySQL to Microsoft SQL sometime in the near future, next 6 to 8 months.
SSMA exists also for MySQL as if I'm think correctly.
I think you're right.
The SSMA.
I think there are several versions of SSMA for MySQL and Access and several others.
Access and Oracle are the most. Access and SQL's Access and Oracle are the most well-known SSMA pods. Oracle to SQL Server and Access to SQL Server.
Well, I have my homework cut out for me for the next 30 days. And I greatly appreciate it, guys. I mean, it's information overload. I'll come a little bit better prepared next month, and I greatly appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here today. Next month is May. That's going to be our last season for the season. After that, we take an extended summer break, June, July, and August, and we're back in September, so we'll be gone for 3 months. Shoot me an email at jsoto@itimpact.com if you have any particular topics. And George, go ahead and say something.
The recording. We're on a different system now. You have to give me the recording somehow.
Okay. All right, I'll go ahead and provide that to you.
Yeah, so I can process it. It'll take me a couple of days, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. George is our unofficial, well, I guess official editor for AccessUserGroups.org. And George, why don't you go ahead and do a plug-in for your next meeting?
I still have not solidified my meeting schedule. I have I'm negotiating with 2 different people. So it depends on who makes the commitment first. But one of the 2 is
what day of the month is your meeting?
We meet the first Thursday, and Ben Sasserich has agreed to come and talk to us about the SQL tool on the website.
Perfect.
So I'm hoping that he'll either do May or June, but it just depends on the other person involved here. I've got.
All right.
Well, actually, there's a third one that's waiting in the wings, which is not, which I think is going to be really exciting when that finally becomes public. It's not just our group, but Tom Van Stiffout is working on that project. And I think you probably got a taste of that at the summit.
Just for information, if you want the SSMA, you get it for Access, for DB2, for MySQL, for Oracle, and for Sybase.
Okay.
And it's free.
Okay.
And at least for Access, it works wonderful. I do everything first with the SSMA, and then I have very little work to do afterwards. I have to do some work, but most things done.
All right. Well, thank you once again, everyone, for being here tonight. I appreciate it. This has been Juan Soto, Microsoft Access with SQL Server Group. If you've been listening to this video on YouTube, we'd love to invite you to our next meeting. We always have it the second Tuesday of every month. And we'll see you the second Tuesday in May. So long, everyone. Have a great evening. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye-bye.